A few days ago, we talked about a ton of really hyped cards that ended up flopping in 2020 Yu-Gi-Oh! In today's video, we're doing the opposite, so we're talking about some of the biggest, the most broken, most influential cards of the year. So I'm going to only be talking about new cards. That was something in the last video that people got confused about. So something that was released in 2017, like True King of All Calamities, will not be mentioned in today's discussion because while the card was influential, it was not a new card of this year. As always, there were tons of broken cards released this year. I cannot possibly cover all of them, but I will be covering as many highlights as I can. First up, we're talking about Lightning Storm, and by the way, this video is going to be in chronological order of North American release dates. So Lightning Storm was one of the first new cards of 2020, and boy did it make a big impact. Lightning Storm became a staple side deck 3 of almost immediately, and while people initially debated about whether it was better than something like Twin Twisters or Evenly Matched, it seemed like the top players, at least for the first couple of months, were really using Lightning Storm over any other back row removal. What made Lightning Storm so popular is that it was so flexible. Yes, it's really only good on turn 1, but you can use it as a Regeki or a Harpy's Feather Duster, which gave it a lot of power in different matchups. One of the other big benefits of Lightning Storm is that you actually didn't have to skip your battle phase like you pretty much have to do when you use Evenly Matched. That meant that going second decks could reliably use Lightning Storm to break their opponent's boards and still have that battle phase to potentially OTK their opponents. Lightning Storm has fallen in popularity the last format, but still this card is very strong, and it was one of the most played cards in the entire year. While it might not be the first card on people's mind when I mention the most broken, most used cards out of the entire year, I want to say that El Shaddoll Ab Clone actually made a huge impact, as well as the other new cards from the Shaddoll structure deck. What Ab Clone was able to do in combination with cards like Wendy and stuff like that was that it brought Shaddolls back to the forefront of competition. Initially, we saw Shaddoll Invoked be a very popular deck that was topping events left and right, but eventually Ab Clone and several of the other Shaddoll cards did make a pretty big impact in many Dogmatica decks because of the Maximus combo. So even besides the dedicated Shaddoll decks, several Shaddoll cards such as Ab Clone still manage to see play even right now because of the Dogmatica engine. Dual Overload had tons of broken and influential cards. This was probably one of the biggest releases out of the entire year. There were so many crazy powerful Link monsters in this set. Of course, Christian Helki Fibrax was probably the biggest card out of the entire year. This was a card that always was getting played in pretty much every single format, except for, interestingly, right now, it's not really in the top tier decks. But besides this exact moment as we close out 2020, Helki Fibrax was the most talked about, the most broken, the most influential card of 2020. This was a huge deal. We had been waiting for this release for years, and I'm not sure why people were so hyped about it, because it was really broken in the OCG, but players really wanted it in our format, and then as soon as it came out, people were like, please ban this card immediately. Much like Firewall Dragon before it, Helki Firebax has also been responsible for many cards getting banned instead of itself, and that obviously is a huge deal. There are so many cards that are currently hit on the Forbidden and Limited list that are only there because Helki Firebrax is still legal. We also saw Predaplant Anaconda and Union Carrier in Dual Overload. Honestly, there are so many cards I could talk about from this set, but we'd be here all day. This was a huge release for 2020 Yu-Gi-Oh! Union Carrier saw tons of play, not only for the Buster Lock, which recently got banned, but also it saw play for equipping Block Dragon from your deck to your monsters if you couldn't search it by other means. In the case of Anaconda, we obviously have seen this card recently with Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, and as we talked about in the overhyped video a couple days ago, Red Eyes Dark Dragoon itself might have not lived up to expectations, but I do think that Anaconda has been very good. We've even seen it in other decks, like Shaddolls are able to use it in a pretty interesting way, so I think Anaconda was one of the best cards of the the year. Moving on to Secret Slayers, I'm pretty sure that Eldlich the Golden Lord was one of the most played cards of the entire year. This thing has been splashed in so many different decks, pretty much every single format since it was released. We saw it in obviously pure Eldlich decks at the beginning of Secret Slayers when it was released, but as time went on we saw more and more variants of different decks that were willing to splash in the Eldlich engine. What it comes down to is that while the Eldlich cards might not be as individually broken as other archetype cards, they are very good in the long game. So you could combine the Eldlich archetype with another deck that was capable of putting out some really strong turn 1 plays, but maybe didn't have as much longevity, so that when your opponent broke your board, you still had a follow-up with the Eldlich cards. Eldlich the Golden Lord was one of the biggest releases out of the entire year, and while it might not seem on paper as overpowered as some other cards, I personally think it was one of the most played cards this year. Also in Secret Slayers, I of course have to mention one of the best rock archetypes ever released, Emancipators. Yeah, the deck has been pretty much non-existent in competition since the release of Block Dragon, and I know Block Dragon wasn't from 2020, but the Emancipators cards themselves were so powerful. All of them are starters and extenders, which made for some really powerful turn 1 plays, and they could play into some pretty scary boards and just bait every single negation, and then finally start their own combo, which was very, very annoying to play against. I really don't know when we'll see another rock archetype that is this strong, but for now, this has pretty much been one of the best rock themes that we've ever seen. Eternity Code had some big cards, but one of the most influential cards was Archosaur, the adorable secret rare dinosaur monster, and this is not the only thing that made dinosaurs a competitive deck, because they were topping in the previous events before Archosaur was released. We even saw a pretty big showing at the UDS in Tulsa and at the 3v3 in Las Vegas. However, Archosaur really did propel dinosaurs to new heights. This was a huge deal. It meant that Miscellaneousaurus was even better than it had been previously, and while dinosaurs might have not been able to take over the format immediately once Eternity Code was released, once we saw the Block Dragon ban, we did see dinosaurs all over the place as a very strong deck in the metagame. Dinosaurs have pretty much been in and out of the meta ever since their structure deck in 2017, but this was probably the most popular that we ever saw the deck, and Archosaur was a huge part of that. Eternity Code also had Access Code Talker. It was the cover card of the set, and this is following in the footsteps of many other big Link 4 finisher monsters, and yeah, it's a great Link 4. This thing in many cases was the card that people started playing over Borrelsword Dragon, which previously had been one of the most popular Link 4 finishers that we'd seen in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Now though, Access Code Talker seems to be more popular. It helps that this card not only has a lot of attack points, but can actually pretty much wipe the entire board, which is very useful when trying to OTK the opponent. While Borrelsword Dragon is still a fantastic monster and plenty of people are still playing it, I think in time Access Code Talker has become the more common choice. Finally, Eternity Code also had Link Cross, a huge release which was obviously used in combination with Krishan Helgi Fibrax a lot, but also cards like Isolde and even Altergeist Hextia. This was a fantastic way to turn your Link monsters into tokens, which you could then use for synchro summons, and it was a very pivotal card for many combo decks. This thing is currently banned, like I said, and I do not think we will see it unbanned for quite a while, but when it was legal, it was very, very powerful. Of all 4 of the core sets this year, Rise of the Duelist was by far the most influential of all of them. This thing had so many great standalone cards and new archetype cards and tons of really, really good options for pretty much any type of player. Obviously, the Dogmatica cards were fantastic and very powerful. A lot of people are still playing them right now. This has been a great engine for tons of control decks. We've seen it combined with things like Invoked and Eldlich and plenty of other decks as well. The Dogmatica engine will probably continue to be played for a long time, or at least until some of the cards end up on the ban list. Triple Tactics Talent and Forbidden Droplet are 2 great standalone cards that pretty much any deck can use if they want to. They're both very versatile versatile, they're both very powerful, and these are cards that you see in all sorts of different decks. Triple Tactics Talent might not be as good as people hyped it up to be, but it is still seeing tons of play. It's especially good in combo decks that want to push through hand traps. You can use it to dig for your combo pieces, you can use it to rip cards out of your opponent's hand, or going second, you can use it to counter cards like Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Forbidden Droplet is good going first or second. Even if you would prefer to see it going second, it's fine to main deck because even going first, it is a piece of interruption. There are some really unique interactions with Forbidden Droplet to play around cards that your opponent might not be expecting you to play around, and for that reason I think that these two cards made a huge impact on the 2020 metagame. In Phantom Rage, we saw the Virtual World archetype. This entire archetype is getting played a lot right now, and what's really cool is that when you look at those decks, there are like 3 of almost every single Virtual World card, so I think the archetype is really powerful. I'm not sure how Konami will address it on the ban list. A lot of people thought that they would have banned True King of All Calamities by this point, but that card is still around. It'll be cool to see if they eventually ban True King of All Calamities if the Virtual World deck is still good enough on its own. For now though, with True King of All Calamities, this is obviously one of the best decks in the format. We also have, of course, AA Zeus, a huge monster from Phantom Rage. This thing has pretty much changed the format because it's brought in a ton of Xyz based strategies. We see Zodiacs and Virtual Worlds can use this, and all sorts of decks. Anything playing Xyz monsters at all wants to use AA Zeus. This is definitely the most impactful card from the Phantom Rage release. Anyway, that is all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We only have one more day of 2020. Well, depending on when you watch this, maybe it's already 2021, but tomorrow I'll have my last video of the entire year. I'll see you guys later though. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.